Hi, I'm Benton Stokes,
And I'm Elaine O'Rourke.
and this is Cocktail Theology.
Can you hear that, people? That is the sound of a cocktail being gently rocked in its glass in front of a microphone.
Indeed it is.
Hi there.
Hi there.
Thank you for this cocktail.
Oh, sure.
I like it.
So it's a Manhattan.
Yes, it is.
It is a Manhattan. Manhattans are bourbon or whiskey. You can make them with rye. You can do a rye Manhattan. Vermouth and bitters, typically traditionally orange, but you can do really any flavor of bitter within reason. But one of the things that we want to talk about today is
purity culture.
Purity culture, not that purity culture, the purity of a real Manhattan.
Thank you. So this all came up. Were we at a restaurant? How did this come up in the first place? We were somewhere. I don't know if we were looking at a cocktail book or at a restaurant or what it was, but they had a list of Manhattans that were not Manhattans. I don't care where you live in Manhattan. I don't care whether you're west side, east side, or all around the town. These were not Manhattans. That doesn't mean they were bad. Now let me be very, very clear here.
Right.
One could have a bastardized Manhattan that is no longer a Manhattan, and it'd be a splendid cocktail.
Of course, just don't call it a Manhattan.
Just don't slap a label on it of Manhattan.
Right. Our friend Bruce brought us the idea that there was a Manhattan that he had at an Italian restaurant that was very tasty.
Maybe that was it.
And it had amaretto in it.
I've blocked it. I've blocked that it came from our friend Bruce because then I'd have to, block Bruce. So I've just turned it into this menu problem.
Well, it is a menu problem.
Okay,
because I've seen menus, and I'm sure we've seen menus together that do that. And they'll do the same thing with other classic cocktails like martinis, for instance.
Oh, like chocolate martini.
Yeah, or an espresso martini.
It's not a martini. Okay, can we may have to, this may be an episode about misuse of words.
Yeah.
Because that's really, I think that's really, And yes, I have only had one sip of a cocktail. Okay, so let's go back to the Manhattan a minute before I start my martini rant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, as you pointed out, a Manhattan is some form of whiskey. I suppose one could make Manhattan with Irish.
Sure.
That would be okay. It would be more like a Bowery.
Yeah.
But it's some form of whiskey, some form of vermouth. I might stretch the fortified wine idea a little bit.
Okay.
Might. And some form of bitters.
Right.
What could one do to that and have it still, when does it stop being a Manhattan? I think it stops being and I had that brandy Manhattan last week.
Yes.
Which was very tasty.
Yes.
It wasn't a Manhattan.
Right.
So I think that one could call it a Manhattan as long as it had some form of whiskey in it. Not sure about the non-vermouth fortified wine. So if it were, say, sherry, that would be weird, but could it be a Manhattan? If it were whiskey and sherry and bitters. I don't know, what do you think?
I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with other fortified wines. Let's see. The sherry is port a fortified wine.
It is.
Okay. So I've seen on menus before Manhattans made with both port and sherry.
Okay.
For me, I tend to stick with vermouth. Now, I think you can make it with different types of vermouth.
Wide variety of vermouths.
Yes, you could do it with a favorite of ours is Dulin Rouge, but we also like the Dulin Blanc, which is really good.
You can make it with a dry.
You could make it with a dry.
And there's a huge range of vermouths, actually. Most people think in terms of like Martini Rossi or Tribuno or something, but that's a very small drop in the bucket of the range of vermouths.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me ask you this: would it be a Manhattan if it were a form of whiskey
Mm-hmm.
and a form of vermouth,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of like bitters, if it were small amount of a bitter liqueur, like
Oh,
Cynar or an Amaro or something like that, would it then still be a Manhattan?
hmm. Well, let's see. By definition, bitters is essentially like an infused clear spirit, right?
Right.
So if you have cherry bitters, for instance, it's going to be a clear spirit like vodka maybe or gin that's been infused with cherry
And many other things.
and other things.
Usually a wide array of herbs and spices and botanicals to get
Okay.
that flavor.
To get
right?
that flavor. Okay. What is an amaro by definition?
I don't know a good definition for an Amaro, but it is a bitter liqueur.
It is, right?
Yeah, they're always bitter. I'm just not an expert. They're thought of as an aperitif. Vermouth is an aperitif.
True.
Sherry, unless it's really sweet sherry, is an aperitif. Ditto with port. So we're staying kind of in the same range, and I think the bitter is important there.
Right. Bitter is important.
I might allow that if we're in small amounts.
Yes. It would have to be done incredibly sparingly, just like you would with a bitter.
That's right. Quarter ounce, maybe. Something along that line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm willing to stretch it that far.
Okay.
I think that's it. I think it has to be a whiskey. I think it has to be on the spectrum of vermouth. And I'm willing to acknowledge there may be something on that spectrum of which I'm unaware.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Okay.
And an amount of a primarily bitter, because the third ingredient has to add that texture, right? Has to add the bitter.
Right.
I'd be willing to do that. I'm willing to go there.
What about in terms of proportion?
I think there's a wider range of proportion. I think proportion has to do with which of those things you're using.
Right. Right. And how they pair.
And how they pair. So, the classic Manhattan is 2 parts whiskey, 1 part vermouth, and a small dash of the bitter object, right? But I've had pairings of whiskeys and vermouth where that proportion could go quite differently.
Sure.
I've forgotten what we had in the house. Oh. It was that dark rye.
Yeah.
Okay? So the dark rye has so much richness and so much kind of depth to it that it needed dry vermouth and it didn't need much to just kind of add that sparkle.
Right.
So in that case, it didn't really require that much. I think you also could have done that if you were using a sweeter vermouth. I wouldn't use a rouge, but if you were using like a blanc or something like that, I think you could have probably gone 1-to-1, honestly.
Yeah.
And still gotten that sense of the Manhattan. Mm-hmm. So I'm not as much a stickler on proportions because it's about balance, right? And proportions are different depending upon what elements are in it.
Sure.
It's like music, right? A balanced piece of music is going to depend upon what the rhythm's like, what the percussion's like, it's not, you can't just say, well,
sure,
you need 2/3 piano.
Right.
I don't know what that would look like, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
All right, martini. Okay, I need to say one thing about martini. Serving it in a classic triangular cocktail glass does not a martini make.
Right. I have learned that much. I don't drink martinis.
That's fine.
But I have learned that much. That many times when you go to a restaurant or to a bar, they'll have a martini menu. That'll have cosmopolitans and other various teenies that
I can't. I wish you guys could see my face right now. I'm so horrified at the thought of this. I'm horrified.
The traditional martini is a gin martini, right?
That's the oldest version.
Yes. Vodka martinis have become popular.
They have.
So one might say that a martini could be made with vodka or with gin.
I will allow it as long as you call it a vodka martini.
Yes.
not just a martini.
Yes.
If it's just a martini, it's gin.
It's gin.
I'm willing to go there. All right, carry on.
Now, what about the argument about olives versus citrus?
I admit I've conceded the olive.
Okay.
I think it becomes something completely different. Olives are tricky. Olives do not pair well with other things. They do, I mean, especially green olives. They do not mate well with other things unless you're going for spice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Give me olives, but put them on the side.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay? Not against olives, but the olive adds an overwhelming amount of flavor to the drink.
Right.
So I guess if you're having a vodka martini and really what you're having is vodka with an olive in it and you're kind of waving the vermouth bottle over the thing, then I could say, okay, sure. Why not? Because you're just having vodka and olives, which is not a bad thing.
Sure. What about a dirty martini?
You mean like a glass that hasn't been washed?
I don't know. People order them. They have a little bit of the brine, right, from olive.
See, and this is where I'm starting to get a little. I mean, I start getting like I can feel my shoulders rising towards my ears. Right? It stresses me a little. To me, that's the far edge of what a martini is. Mm-hmm. Really, the far edge. To me, at this point in my life, the best martini is good gin, and it can be a range of gin. Although I like a drier gin for a martini. Mm-hmm. It can be a perfumed gin. It could be a Tanqueray or a Hendrix or something like that. But it needs to be kind of on the drier end. And it needs to have some punch for it to be good. Mm-hmm. And then it has our friend vermouth in it. And again, wide range of vermouth.
Yes.
It could have dry vermouth. It can have sweet. It depends upon what it is. It's all about balance. Mm-hmm. And actually, I like a bit of bitters in my martini. Just a little bit. Which then makes it a gin Manhattan. Which we call a martini.
A gin Manhattan. I've never heard that term, but you're right.
Right? So if you've got gin and you have vermouth and you have a dash of bitters, that's a Manhattan, but made with gin.
Right.
Called a martini.
Right. Because we don't call it a Manhattan.
No, we do not.
Because it does not have any whiskey in it.
We do not. Not in my house, we don't. Not in our house, we don't. In fact, if you have friends who want to call it a gin Manhattan, they may not drink in our house. You may bring them onto the patio at a reasonable social distance. Let this be a lesson to you for any lovers you may bring home. I'm not too worried about it, but they better not call it a gin Manhattan, because I don't think I can handle it.
I'm confident no one I'll bring home will call it a gin Manhattan.
The amount of relief I feel right now. I mean, truly.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I guess I'm really a purist about those two. I think the classics, there's a reason they're classic. And it's because they strike a very particular balance. And that doesn't mean other things aren't good. But that's what they are, right?
That's what they are.
And balance matters. So if you're going through wait for it, a bitter time.
Yes.
Having some depth helps.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
Having some sparks of brightness helps. Hence, a correct cocktail, a correct classic cocktail. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. One other cocktail that I want to bring up is the margarita.
Oh, yeah.
Now, margaritas are another one of those drinks that lots of things get thrown into margaritas or into drinks that are called margaritas.
Okay. I think you have more opinions about this one than I do.
Probably.
Okay.
I know that, two of the big things, frozen versus rocks. I think I have had a few frozen margaritas that I enjoyed. Most frozen margaritas, in my opinion, come off tasting like slushies, and there's not a lot of substance to them.
Well, there's the problem is alcohol doesn't freeze well, right? So what you're really doing is upping the proportion of sugar in order to get that texture, which means it's going to be a slushy with some alcohol thrown in, right?
Yeah, right. So rocks, I think, and
or up.
Or up. You could do it up.
Yeah.
Sure. I do enjoy the margarita cold though. So if you're gonna do it up, then it should be shaken with ice.
Ooh, have you ever had? So I used to a long time ago have a set of cocktail glasses where it was the triangular type,
Mm-hmm.
but it's set into a essentially a bowl of ice,
Really?
and so you would, and it was fit right, it fit together, and there was just a little bit of something between them to hold back the ice,
Mm-hmm.
but as a result, you would put it back in, and it would be cold when you picked it back up.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes, the hand of God was in that somewhere. God looked at some poor inventor trying to make a buck off of cocktail accoutrements and went, you know what, dude or gal?
I'm just going to throw you this one.
I'm going to throw you this. Ready? Yes.
Genius.
Angels sang. It was brilliant. Anyway, sorry, going back to your...
Well, I think with margaritas, it's best to stay away from the pre-made mixes because they're loaded with sugar.
Well, and preservatives that throw off the taste of everything else.
Yeah. So I find that a good margarita has essentially, just like a good Manhattan or a good martini, has essentially 3 ingredients. Which are tequila.
Mm-hmm.
I generally opt for a silver, an orange liqueur of some sort, and then lime. And lime can be fresh squeezed. It can be a lime simple syrup or a sweetened lime juice, but lime.
Okay.
Some could argue salt also, and that's fine. I personally don't do salt usually, but
I like salt. Like, I like adding a pinch of salt before I shake it.
before you shake it.
So there's a little bit of salt, just a tiny bit, because it perks up flavors.
Yeah, that I could get for sure.
Yeah.
But one thing that you and I know have learned in playing around with margaritas is that the pairing of the tequila and the orange liqueur really matters.
Really matters.
And sometimes cheaper liqueur and cheaper tequila make really great margaritas. Sometimes you can overdo one or the other. Like, I've done high-end orange liqueur with a really decent tequila, and it's not as good as cheaper ingredients.
Absolutely.
So margarita is a great cocktail if you're trying to have cocktails with a couple of friends. You don't want to break the bank to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it with a really inexpensive tequila. Triple sec is fine. And then just a little bit of lime or sweetened lime.
Yeah, and I've done margaritas a lot of different ways too, and I would say that actually an aged tequila is the wrong way to go.
Yeah.
Don't do golden, don't
Mm-mm.
do an añejo, don't do anything that's aged, because what you're looking for in margarita is fresh. It needs to taste fresh.
Yeah.
And it needs to have brightness.
Yes.
Right? So, yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Okay, so here's a question.
Mm-hmm.
Martha Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just say how much I love that she's like friends with Snoop Dogg? I've always loved Martha, and she got a raw deal but anyway. So Martha Stewart used to make her margaritas, or at least we were told she made her margaritas, with a number of different fresh juices. So orange, lemon, lime, heavy on the orange and the lime. And then that would sit for a while and just kind of be its thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that and tequila, and I don't remember, probably a little bit of triple sec or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the mingling of fresh juices, etc.? Is it still a margarita?
I think I would be willing to go along with that, as long as the juices are citrus. I think it's important that it's citrus.
Yes.
I don't think a strawberry...
It's not a margarita.
Yeah, I think
I'm
it ceases
sorry.
to be a margarita if it's strawberry.
God, I'm such a snob. I started to say that in that case it would be a tequila daiquiri, except, darn it, daiquiris don't have fruit in them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my eyes are starting to hurt. This is giving me pain. I would much rather talk about the meaning of ancient Greek words than this. This is giving me pain. So much pain. All right, I'm sorry. Let's finalize the margarita.
So citrus is okay.
Okay.
So if you're going with lemon, lime, orange, grapefruit.
Okay. Oh, okay. When does it stop being a margarita and start being a paloma if you're using grapefruit?
Well, palomas actually are just tequila and grapefruit soda.
Hmm.
Now, you could put some grapefruit juice in there if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so going back to the margarita then, if I did silver tequila, and I prefer 100% agave, I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
So silver tequila, triple sec, there are some that are better than others,
Mm-hmm.
lime juice, and I added some bitters. Is that okay?
I think it depends. I think if the bitters are citrus bitters,
Okay.
so if you're using, like, for instance, if you used a grapefruit bitter, which I have before, tried that in a margarita, and it's yummy. It brightens it up in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might be okay. You couldn't use, like,
Chocolate bitters.
chocolate bitters or watermelon bitters.
Well, is that because they don't taste good or because it wouldn't be a margarita anymore?
It wouldn't be a margarita.
Okay, fair enough. All right, I'm willing on that. So here's what I've done before with margaritas that has worked really well.
Mm-hmm.
So the first two are a given. The juices being fresh lime juice, usually a little bit of fresh orange juice because it wakes up the triple sec. And then I've grated the lime peel in, which gives the bitterness.
Oh, that's nice.
But keeps it on the whole.
Uh-huh.
That okay? Is that all right?
Mm-hmm. I could go with that.
Okay, I'm so glad we've solved this. And I'm so glad we are of one mind on this.
It's true.
And that my household will not be despoiled. You know, really, this is what should be on those questions for all those dating apps.
Here's what I really need to know. What do you consider a martini?
Or which of these things goes into a martini?
Yeah.
Which of these things goes into a margarita?
Mm-hmm.
And if you come back with, I don't know at all, then I don't think you belong in this world, frankly. But I mean, that would be. But see, here's the thing, right? If you get too gritty, tiny on proportions, like if you're, well, a martini is exactly this, then yeah, you're not for me either.
No.
Because there's no fun in you.
Yeah, no.
You know, that's about your OCD.
Right.
It's not about whether a cocktail tastes good, right? And the reality is your taste buds are different than mine.
Yeah.
And so we might mix proportions somewhat differently. We might use different brands of things, but nomenclature, we've covered nomenclature. I feel like we've talked about the only purity culture I care about. And frankly, whenever I'm on Twitter and people are just bantering about, what about I grew up in purity culture, can I still masturbate? I'm like, oh my God. I mean, first of all, the fact that's a question says no, you probably shouldn't. Because clearly you still have too much guilt. No.
Too much
No,
guilt.
no, no. No. Just stop. Can you see a therapist? Oh, yes. Please. Please. Or please be involved with someone who thinks the same way you do.
Yeah. Yes.
Save it up.
Yes.
You know.
Right.
Weekends and holidays. I'm sorry. It is one of those things where I just look at it and go, all right, there are good questions we who follow Jesus should ask.
Yes.
About all things. Sex. All of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But can I do this and still think I am part of... It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You so don't understand what this is all about.
You don't understand what this is all about at all.
No. Please go read Deuteronomy and come back.
Right.
And then look at the inside of your jacket, and if it's made of mixed fibers, we're done. We're done. Mic drop.
Right.
But I'm not gonna drop these because they're
pretty.
Yeah, they are pretty.
Getting back to cocktails for a minute. One thing that we do in the preparation of cocktails is we shake pretty much everything.
There are very few things I don't shake. Now, do you want me to get on a high horse about this?
Sure.
Okay. So, one should never shake a clear drink.
Okay.
So, a martini, in theory, should not be shaken because it's clear. And what happens is when you shake it, it muddies. Right? And part of the point of a martini is that clarity, that pristine look. That's the idea. You should always shake something with citrus because you're trying to break down the citrus.
Right.
Okay, so an old-fashioned should be shaken. However, I like things cold. If I'm going to have a cocktail, I want it cold, or it's not a cocktail for me. As a result, I tend to wind up shaking everything. And what I've noticed is you shake much more slowly than I do. You kind of swirl shake. You've got this swirl shake thing going on. I'm like, shake it until my hand can't hold the thing.
Yeah.
But what I did learn, and it took me a while to do this, was that the shaker should be very full of ice. Very full of ice. Don't skimp on the ice, because it gets colder faster without the ice melting.
Right.
Okay? So you fill it with ice, add the drink, I mean, not actually that way, but you add it, and then shake until your hand can't handle it anymore. Then it's cold and it hasn't gotten too diluted.
Oh, yeah.
But it will be fuzzy. I'm just going to say.
Well, yeah, it will be fuzzy.
So, yeah, I think shakers are really good things. I like a good shake and drink. I'm trying to think of something I would want stirred instead. Maybe an aviation.
Which, although is served in a martini glass,
is not
in
a
fact,
martini.
A martini.
In fact, actually, I really love an aviation in a coupe glass, in kind of those rounded.
Those are so pretty. I
love those. So the coupe glass is, it looks like a 1940s martini glass, right? Or coupe glass is also what one used to serve ice cream in the days of soda fountain, that kind of thing, right? That's a coupe glass.
Love coupe glass.
I really like an aviation in a coupe glass. There's something about that.
Speaking of glasses, does the glassware matter?
Say more about that.
Does it matter if you serve a margarita in a lowball? Does it matter if you serve a martini in a coupe glass?
One may serve a martini in a coupe glass. One may not serve a martini in an old-fashioned glass, in what we would call a lowball. Yeah. This may not hold a martini. You want to know why?
Why?
Warms up too fast.
Ah, right, because the martini glass has a stem.
That's right. And the point of the stem is to keep it cooler, right? That's why white wine glasses really absolutely positively must have stems. Gotcha. Okay? So for me, it's partly that. Does it matter past that? Probably not. I mean, look, even the most delicately, carefully crafted, beautiful cocktail doesn't stay cold. And most of what happens with it happens in your mouth rather than in your nose. So glassware, in terms of does the glass slant inwards at the top or does the glass slant outwards and stuff, is less important for most, I would say. It's really aesthetic at that point, as long as it's the difference between stemmed and unstemmed, in my view.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Anything else? Anything else we can solve for our listeners?
Well, the only other thing that I wanted to say was, while we are talking about the purity of these classic cocktails, we are not in any way discouraging experimentation with cocktails. Just don't call them a classic cocktail if that's not what they are.
Okay, that's
so we are constantly making up cocktails.
Constantly.
I made one the other night that started out as a Manhattan, but I added some other things to it.
Oh my God!
It stopped being a Manhattan. I don't know what to call it yet, but it was Kentucky bourbon, sweet vermouth, triple sec, and it was chocolate bitters. So it tasted a little bit like a chocolate orange. It was a pretty rich cocktail. I was surprised.
Which bourbon did you use?
I think I used the Evan Williams.
See, it'd be interesting to use something either richer or more, I want to say sharp, but that's the only word that comes to me, right? It would be interesting to see what happens with that. Like, what would happen if you used the Caribbean dark bourbon, right, with that? Like, then you'd want more bright, right? You'd have to kind of bump up the bright.
Maybe bump up the triple sec just a little.
A little bit of the triple sec, a little bit of orange bitters, extra, like orange bitters as well as the chocolate.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I've ever loved you as much as I do right now. Like, right now I'm looking at you and going, what a piece of work is man. How noble in creation, how infinite in faculty, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in apprehension, how like in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god. The beauty of the world, the paragon of animals.
Oh, wow.
Shakespeare was writing about
you,
brother. Of course, he was being facetious, but still, I'm not. This is This is from purity of heart, bro.
Purity of heart.
Purity of heart. So the worst kind of cocktail is an empty one. So I think we should call this little thing to an end, and you should make me whatever that was before.
Okay, I think I could do that.
And it was a Manhattan.
It was a Manhattan.
Don't even mess with me right now.